this second line of development is really this act of love on the substance of matter. So if we talk about matter as being this essential division of these four powers who become their opposites, then the action of love is really the integration of these four powers in more and more complex harmonies rising up. And perhaps that is the evolution. But we see it very concretely at various scales of matter as it manifests itself. So when we look at the quantum level, we see that there's a way to structure all quantum particles into four fundamental divisions. And that's part of where I'm going to go today. As we rise further up, we see that it's possible to structure all atoms that are known into four fundamental divisions. And as we rise further up the scale, we see very concretely that it's possible to structure the essential molecular plans in any single cell into four fundamental divisions. And these four divisions are the same. They are the same four divisions that had hurled down and created matter. So matter in its upward journey is willing to garb itself in quantum particles, in atoms, in molecules, in cells, as per these four powers that are implicit in matter. So that's where we will go practically. Now, just to summarize some of what we went through yesterday, we started with this equation: the master of existence, or the divine, is at least the union of Sat, Chit, and Ananda. Now, I know there's not many mathematicians or scientists here, but this is another way to express and to gain insight. And the practicality of taking equations, the simple equations, is very powerful, because then we can begin to apply it in different places. We had subsequently created 4 sets from our reading of Savitri. And this was the set of Sat. So I'll remind you of some of the qualities of Sat that we had come across. And Sat has to do with existence in time and space. So marvelous works, crystal home, laborers in the quarries, architects of immortality, perfection, order, skillful, executive faculty, so on. So these were things that we had discovered while reading Savitri, that were descriptions of the dharmas, or of Savitri, or of the flaming pioneers of the omnipotent's flaming pioneers. Similarly, we had looked at a set of consciousness, and there were some descriptors: sun-lift, will, shall be the meaning, sun-eyed, great creators with white brows of calm, etc. Okay. There was also many descriptors of the force aspect: cords of strength, shafts of power, massive barrier breakers, wrestlers with destiny. And then there were some descriptors of Ananda: delight, bliss, mysteries of joy, love, Dionysian cup of joy, lips chanting, bliss, attractive, etc., magnetic, enchanting, secret rhythms. And to enter into this mathematics, these are large sets, but I just summarize them. So existence or presence is a set which has in it elements such as service, perfection, diligence, perseverance. Power has such elements as power, courage, adventure, justice, and so on. Knowledge has such elements as knowledge, wisdom, lawmaking, spread of knowledge. And nurturing or love has such elements as compassion, harmony, relationship, love, and so on. Now the question is, how can we create that equation which takes those four master sets and essentially from those four master sets creates all the million figures that we see around us, or the million organizations that are developing. So, one way to do it, and it's not the only way, but it's one way that made sense to me, and I saw it also being applied very well in the different realms that I'm going to go into in a few minutes, is to assume that you have these four sets, that's set 1, set 2, set 3, set 4, and they have all their many, many elements in them. And let's assume that we take one element from, say, the set of existence or sat or presence, so this master set, we take one element and we say that the essential essence of this organization, whether it's a country, whether it's a person, or whether it's something arising in matter, this element here from this set is going to be the primary dharma or essence of being of this organization that's going to be created. And then subsequent to that, there are many, many variations possible. So this will be weighted in mathematical terms. This element is going to be weighted pretty heavily. But you're going to have a number of other elements that could come from each of these sets that will be secondary elements of this primary element. So in that sense, from these four master sets, you can see, if you combine these in different ways, you can come up with endless possibilities, endless. So just in mathematical notation, because I know that some people perhaps have a curiosity and there will be a fulfillment to some part of your mind if you see what it looks like or represented mathematically. And you may not be able to see this and I can draw it out, but here we assume that the essence of dharma of a particular organization is this primary element X, weighted by something A. So imagine that you have courage as your primary element, and it's weighted with, say, 9. So it's 9 courage, and then you have Y, which is a secondary element, weighted with 1. So obviously courage is very strong in that particular organization, but then there are many other small attributes that further nuance courage, that further add to courage. It may be a love of justice, it may be some aesthetic consideration. So one can see that from these seeds that are created, you can have entire essences of, whether you're looking at a country or you're looking at a large organization or you're looking at an individual person and what they stand for, you have the seed for the uniqueness that perhaps that person or that organization or that country represents. And so you have XA plus YB, and this YB is repeated many times, but to a weight of 1, where X is derived from one of the sets, and then Y is derived from all the sets, but with less weighted. So that's all we're saying mathematically. Okay. And that becomes, if you will, the signature for the essence or uniqueness of an organization. Now, this may be a little abstract, but I want to try and ground it fairly quickly by some practical examples. So I'm going to switch. So let's take the example of living cells. So I know you have some interest in cellular biology, or no? Yeah, and any other people who have studied biology or cellular? Okay, great. Okay. So there's a number of molecular plans, if you will, that animate all the activities in a cell. Let's consider one of them. Nucleic acids. What's the function of a nucleic acid? It basically encodes information. So they store and they transmit the genome, which is kind of the set of principles of how that cell is going to act and how it's going to create its reality and interact with everything around it. So they function as the cell's librarians and contain information on how to make proteins and when to make them. So in some sense, a nucleic acid is the keeper of the cell's knowledge, its wisdom, its ability to make laws, the vehicle to spread knowledge within cells and to the next generation of cells. So being so, one can see that perhaps nucleic acids is a precipitation of this overarching principle of knowledge derived from this master set, which is one of the fundamental qualities of the divine. Okay, let's move on. So this is one of the molecular plans in a cell. Another molecular plan is proteins. So what's the function of proteins? Proteins are the cell's workhorses. So if you look anywhere in a cell, you'll see thousands of proteins at work. In a single human cell, there are 30,000 proteins and counting. And what do these 30,000 proteins do? They do everything that is happening in the cell. They take on, there are proteins that can take on different shapes and become cogs in a wheel, basically do the mechanical functioning in the cell by virtue of becoming different shapes that fit together like a machine. One thing. They are enzymes for different kinds of reactions in the cell. Chemical catalysts, molecular motors. So there's all kinds of, everything that you see fundamentally happening in the cell is due to the action of proteins. And there's an incredibly wide diversity of proteins. And so when you think about it, what does a protein represent in the scheme of things? You can perhaps say that it exists for service, to bring about perfection at the level of the cell. And it's characterized by extreme diligence and perseverance. And so you begin to see that it's a precipitation of this essential quality of the divine, which we call sat or presence. And so this molecular plan that exists in cells is nothing other than this power of the divine at the cellular level, brought together through the action of love, or created through the action of love. Lipids, another major molecular plan at the cellular level. So what's the function of lipids? So lipids by themselves are tiny molecules. But when they group together, they form the largest structures in the cell. And when placed in water, lipid molecules basically aggregate to become these waterproof sheets. And these sheets separate different activity that's going on in the cell. So they create a basis of harmony and nurturing. They allow different parts of the cell to do the different things that they need to do. So if one thinks about the nature of the lipids are promoters of relationship, of harmony in the cell, of nurturing the cell, of division of labor. So they allow specialization and uniqueness to emerge. And so we can say that the lipids are perhaps a precipitation of this essential quality of the divine, of love or harmony or ananda in some way. When we look at polysaccharides, the fourth molecular plan in any living cell, we see that polysaccharides are long branched chains of sugar molecules. And these sugar molecules, they provide the storehouse of the cell's energy. But further, very interesting, not only energy, but polysaccharides become the hard outer surface of the cell. So when you look at the bark of a tree, or the tough shell of an insect that's made from polysaccharides. So there's some kind of strength and energy that polysaccharides are representing. And so if you think about it, they function to create energy, power, courage, strength. And so one can see that polysaccharides are perhaps a manifestation of this set of power or the force aspect of Chit, an essential property of the divine. And so we're seeing that as something that's pretty tangible. There's been lots of research. I'm not talking out of some conjecture here. There's been a lot of research on this, decades of research on what exists in any cell. And you'll find that there are these four plans. And if you think about what these four plans represent, they mirror exactly what we're saying was the essential quality of the divine that took the plunge into matter and then re-emerged from matter through the action of love. Now, there are 30,000 proteins. What's the essence of each protein? That's where the equation I had introduced you to earlier comes into play. So, this is hypothesis. That I would hypothesize that the 30,000 proteins can be represented by a single equation. And this equation is simply a form of the equation I had showed you earlier, where you take, I call it signature of protein, is equal to some weight of a primary element X and a lower weight of secondary element Y derived from these four fundamental sets. And so then when we look at the proteins of any possible nucleic acid, the signature of any possible nucleic acid, we can say also that it's this play of diversity outflowing from an essential quality of the divine. Similarly for lipids and polysaccharides. Now, let's step back for 1 minute. When we look at where in matter the cell exists, we're looking at, say, 10 to the minus 6 meters. The known size of the universe, roughly 10 to the 26 meters. And the smallest size that has been theoretically computed as possible to measure, 10 to the minus 24 which gives a range of 60 orders of magnitude. And the cell sits in the middle of this. But let's take a plunge to the smallest level that we can possibly get our heads around, which is the quantum particle, and see whether this similar structure exists at the quantum particle level or not.
Did you come up with that?
Yes,
That's your own thinking?
it's my own work. Yeah.
Yeah,
So, yeah, by the way, so I have been working on this for 2 years, and this is not public yet, but I have about 300 pages, and I've derived about 250 equations. So, but which look at the essential matter as it begins to evolve.
Comment that two components I'd like you to address. In the cell, the nucleic acids, the genes are isolated from the rest of the cell in the nucleus. It's the messenger RNA in a sense. Yeah, so if the nucleus without the RNA would be stillness, there would be no action beyond that. So what role, how would you fit that into without the messenger RNA bringing that knowledge out of the nucleus to the rest of the cell? You would have no action.
Yeah.
But this thing,
The second part is the mitochondria,
Yeah.
which is their energy source. Without that, you have the messenger, the knowledge transferred, but no action, nothing happening without the energy in mitochondria. How do you fit those two elements in here?
Yeah, so I think that if we look at, for example, the function of RNA or the function of mitochondria, they are in some sense the instances of the other primary aspects. We talked about energy, or we talked about harmony and relationship. So, all I'm saying is that this is a possible way to look at the cell and a way to think about its functioning, where you can see that there are it's any kind of function that you can look at in the cell is fundamentally divided into these 4 aspects. So RNA, even if it's a messenger function, it takes the information from inside and pushes it outside. But yet it's fulfilling this primary function of harmony and relationship.
leading toward fractals?
Fractals is fundamental to this, yes.
well, and probably admit, RNA and DNA fit into the nucleic acid subset.
Sure.
Mitochondrial DNA fits into that also, as well as the energy producing function into the polysaccharide subset.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's all, yeah.
It's not, sure. Yeah, I mean, this is just, there's
Yeah.
many different ways
Yeah,
to connect it.
The
Yeah.
mitochondria story is actually like an integration between multiple things, as well as the hypothesis that it was integrated into the human cell, into the mammalian cell from bacteria.
Yeah, and I'm by no means a biologist or anything. This is just something that I observed from a distance. And,
No, I
it
think
needs
this
to be
is
qualified,
amazing.
but,
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
Anyway, so let's just move on and look at the architecture of quantum particles. Now, for decades,
What level are they?
quantum particles at the very bottom,
So the negative?
10 to the minus 24.
24, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And so roughly order of magnitude, somewhere around
Yeah.
there.
Thank you.
So, for many decades, physicists were amazed because they thought that, with the atom they had kind of got it all. Right? And then they discovered the proton and neutron and electron and said, oh well, okay, that's it. And then they discovered, okay, there's quarks and leptons and bosons, and okay, that's it. But the fact is that the deeper they look, the more and more fundamental particles there seems to be. However, they came up with this model called the the standard model of particles. And in this existing model, there are